In the amazing world of AP classes, there are many hardships to go through to barely get a 3 on the exam. And well, as someone who's trying to major in mechanical engineering, of course I have to go ahead and take them. Thing is, one of the classes that I took this year was none other than computer science principles. Because well, I'm a furry. Why wouldn't I know how to code? It was mostly because my school didn't offer engineering programs. Regardless, I'm not here to yap about AP classes like the average slime ranter. I'm just here to talk about what I did for the APCSP Create Task project, which for context, the Create Task project is basically this coding project you have to do at the end of the year that adds up to your total score, which needs inputs and outputs, a list, a procedure with a parameter, and an algorithm that has sequencing, selection, and iteration, which to the non-programmer mind basically means what you give it and what it gives back, a set of names, and the kinds of steps, which include sequencing, selecting depending on certain factors, and repeating steps until something is done or analyzed. So today we'll basically be going over how my code works. Before we move on though, I will say that the code that I wrote will be licensed under an MIT license, which basically means that if you use the code for whatever reason, I don't know why someone would use my code, the credit that claims I made it has to stay there. More info at opensource.org, I don't know, just don't use it in your create task. So this is a little program that I made. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, basic goal. As you can see here, it's already got an input and it's got an output. Great, so that thing is off the checklist. And this is the code behind it. It's definitely a handful, but we're gonna go over it anyway. But before that, we want to know what this program actually does. This program was based off the American long distance rail system, Amtrak, cause why not? What this program does is tell you what trains to take based on the station you're at and where you want to go. More specifically, this was designed with the Texas roots in mind due to its simplicity, yet able to give me a challenge. So let's test it a little. After randomly choosing 2 stations with the wheel, we plug in Fort Worth and Beaumont to the program. Now here it's telling us to take the Texas Eagle train to San Antonio, and from there take the Sunset Limited train to Beaumont. So now let's see if that's fact or cap. Alright, let's see. Take the Fort Worth Texas Eagle to San Antonio. Alright, and then take the Sunset Limited to Beaumont. Yeah, seems legit. But how did I make this work? Did I just program every single possibility and combination? Well, no, that would be stupid and it doesn't meet with College Board standards. So let's actually analyze what was done. Looking at the code here, we can see 155 lines of code, specifically Python, including comments. It also has one application programming interface, or API. An API is something that actually helps your code talk to the computer itself and not just be stuck in a console. In my case, for example, I use tkinter, which is what makes the window pop up in the first place. Now this technically was optional. I could have used the console, but I thought, nah, we ball. Staring into the actual code now, we can see this first important part. Import tkinter as tk, and from tkinter import ttk, which what it does is, well, it imports tkinter as tk, and from tkinter it imports ttk. I'm gonna be completely honest, I have no idea what import does exactly. All I know is that at some point it gives you the library. My fault, I'm still new to this sort of thing. Yes, I'm a LARPer, I know. Just trust Google for this one. I know what the rest does though. When you import something as something else, you're basically just renaming it into that something else for convenience reasons, I guess. So in this case, instead of having to fully type out tkinter, you can just shorten it to tk like I did. Or you can rename it into whatever you want. From tkinter import ttk, what it basically does is so you don't have to include the first part of the function you decide to import from the API. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because this video is already a bunch of spaghetti code by itself. Moving on, now to the part about getting the window to pop up. This first line defines the variable root as the actual window, while the second one names it, and the third part is the size by pixels. What frame here does is basically so that any UI layout you place doesn't mess up the window and is based off the frame's position. The first line defines it, and the second one places it so other layouts base off it. Welcoming label is a text that welcomes you. For the entry labels that we actually use to get the user input, we use ttk.entry. So this is this, and this is that. And plus the labels that tell you what to put in each entry, so you don't get confused on where to put where you're at and where you want to go. And a little fun fact is that focus set makes it so that when you open the program at first, it makes it so you can start typing right away without clicking the entry box, which in this case was done with starting station. And then finally we got the button, which is, well, the button. And we also got the output label, which can only be triggered by pressing the button. But how does that happen? Well, for that we gotta look at the click definition that was named in the buttons command, which is this. This is a function where you can define your own procedures. What this function does in this case is that when called, it resets the output label to show nothing and then gets whatever was typed into the entry fields and assigns them to starting and ending station respectively. It checks if something was actually typed into it, because otherwise it displays this message, and then it does the action find route with the parameters starting station and ending station. What does that do? Well, that basically begins the whole actual program, but we're gonna get to that in a bit. This is another additional thing we're gonna get to after that whole ordeal, and the final line basically updates the output label to be whatever result is. Okay, so now let's actually find out what find route does and what the whole program is about. It's definitely a handful, isn't it? And there's also a bunch of functions we gotta define first before we can do all of this. But before we can do that, we gotta look at the lists that are going to be used. That's it. That's the lists. It's just the stations of specific routes. Okay, back to defining. The first function we're going to be looking at is find line, which finds the line of a specific station that is given in the parameter. It scans through the 3 lists by checking each station in them individually, and if it finds a match, then it assigns that line. If it doesn't find any matches in the 3 stations, then it just returns invalid. Assign lines list returns a line's respective list of stations by checking if the name fits either of the 3 valid lines. The reason it doesn't have an invalid variable is because all invalid variables would have already been thrown away by find line or corrected. Which, by the way, looking back to today, I realized I could have always just used upper to capitalize the entire string, but I didn't because I rushed it. Next up is find common station, which takes 2 lines, uses assign lines list to get the list of the stations, and then scans all of the stations to see if any match. This is actually an important function in order to determine key transfer stations. If it doesn't find any matches to return, then it goes to its backup, which is find common Texas Eagle, which is this one. This is when I noticed a pattern, because the Sunset Limited and the Heartland Flyer never connect to each other directly. However, the Texas Eagle connects both of them, so I used that to my advantage, even if my code now had to be a little less automated per se. What this function does is, first it assigns variables with placeholders, then it checks start line and sees if it's equal to the Sunset Limited list. If it is, it assigns start common the string San Antonio, because San Antonio is a transfer station between the Texas Eagle and Sunset Limited. If not, then that means it's the Heartland Flyer, which then assigns Force Wars instead. The process is repeated for end line, and then it returns both variables as a list, which we'll see why later. Whew. Well, that was all the functions. Now let's actually tackle this monster. This function is basically just a huge if statement plus a few more if statements, cause I'm just such a good programmer. So this is section 1 and this is section 2. But first, it has to go through 2 checks to make sure the inputs are valid. The first check uses find line to make sure none of the 2 inputs that were put in are invalid, cause otherwise it returns this. The second line checks to make sure the 2 inputs aren't the same thing. Because if they are, then that would imply you're trying to get to a station you're already at, so therefore it returns this instead. Now on to section 1. First, it checks to see if any input is either San Antonio or Force Wars. If it is, it sends you to section 2. If it isn't, then it keeps you at section 1. The reason we do this is because these stations are transfer stations, and if you're trying to either get there or leave there, the program gets confused due to having 2 possibilities. Staying in section 1, now what it does is assign start line and end line using find line. Then it checks to see if those 2 are the same lines. If it is, then that would mean you're traveling within the same line, and so displays a simple message. If it isn't, then it does find common station between the 2 lines and assigns it to the variable transfer. Now remember, find common station can either return a string or a list, depending on whether the first 2 lines have a common station, in which it returns the common station as a string, or if it has to use a Texas Eagle to connect them using find common Texas Eagle, which returns 2 strings in a list. Back to the main function, it checks if string is a list. If not, then it returns a simple 2-line text based on the transfer station and the lines found. If it is a list, then it returns a 3-line text with a more complicated framework. Alright, so that's section 1. Now for section 2, which only happens if either of your inputs are San Antonio or Fort Worth. First, it checks if starting station is San Antonio. Then, it checks if ending station is Fort Worth. If both are true, it returns this. The reason why this is done manually is because for the rest of the code, we have to physically tell the program where to head for certain possibilities without getting it confused. It kinda ruins the magic, but if it works, it works. If starting station is San Antonio but ending station isn't Fort Worth, then instead finds the line of ending station, and if the end line is Heartland Flyer, then it returns this. But if it's not, since it could be Texas Eagle or Sunset Limited, it just returns whatever line the ending station is at. If starting station isn't San Antonio, then it checks and does the same thing, except based off Fort Worth. So Fort Worth and San Antonio are switched around, and replaces Sunset Limited with Heartland Flyer, as Heartland Flyer is now a direct option. If your starting station is neither San Antonio or Fort Worth, then it checks your ending station. The process is a bit different. If ending station is in San Antonio, then it automatically finds the line for starting station. If it's Heartland Flyer, then it displays this automatically due to its whereabouts. If not, then it just displays the line to San Antonio, as it could be any other line that could take you there. Finally, if ending station is in San Antonio, then by default it's going to assume it's Fort Worth, because like I said, you can only get to section 2 if either of your inputs are San Antonio or Fort Worth. The same process is then done, only Heartland Flyer is swapped with Sunset Limited because of the whereabouts, and we switch places with San Antonio and Fort Worth. Alright, so finally, we know how the code works. Oh, and plus also this piece of code that basically makes it so that the code runs forever until you close the window. So remember the test stations we did at the beginning of the video to see if the program worked? Let's see what happened with those. Let's start with the test. So let's do find line first for both. Find line for Fort Worth, default to Texas Eagle. Find line for Beaumont. Oh look, here it is, Sunset Limited. Okay, so both are valid stations. Are they the same? No, Fort Worth and Beaumont are two different things. Is any station either San Antonio or Fort Worth? Yes it is, so we go to section 2. Is starting station San Antonio? No. Is starting station Fort Worth? Yes. Is ending station San Antonio? No. Find line for Beaumont? Well, we already know it's Sunset Limited, that's end line now. Is end line Sunset Limited? Yes. So we return, take the Texas Eagle to San Antonio, then take the Sunset Limited to ending station Beaumont. We already verified this was true, and so now we know how this excuse of a program with a huge workaround filled with spaghetti code works. This is the stuff that got me a 4, by the way. Okay. Alright. Okay. So what was the purpose of this video? Well, I originally built this code as a train fanatic for my APCSP Create Task project. This video's purpose was more so done to share a project I'm somewhat proud of with the world, and also to potentially inspire and help out other APCSP students. But why? The Amtrak website already does this for us and shows schedules and prices. Well, you're right, it's not exactly a revolutionary program, and I obviously don't declare myself no computer science master. I honestly don't even know what a class or object is. But I'll learn about it soon, guys, trust. Wow, you don't even know what an object is? I'm an object. You really are stupid. Shut off the camera. What was that for? What was that about? What are you doing? Hey, is that a wooden bat? Okay, wait, Yo, what is he doing? Wait. Yo, river crossing is actually so cooked, bro. I'm sorry. Wait, no, stop. Whoa. Back off! Back off! Yo! What this does, by the way, is that it adds additional information to results about Texarkana, because technically Texarkana isn't in Texas. It's like this whole deal, and this just makes sure both inputs aren't the same, so it doesn't display when both inputs are Texarkana.